Welcome to Dare a New Belief, a place to discover what is possible for your life after the loss of a loved one, and where you will find inspiration, insight, support, and love, and hopefully a bit of laughter to help you through your day. Now, here's your host, Nada Hogan.
Welcome to Dare a New Belief, where you will find light and life, love and joy, healing, faith, and hope. A place where you get to believe in what is possible for your life. And on today's show, I have the great honor to have Katie Elliot back with me again as we roll into part 2. So if you missed part 1, please go back and listen to that. That was just last week. Please go back and listen to that because Katie's story from a massive breakdown in 2016 that completely set her life in a different trajectory that is so empowering. You'll want to hear that. And just a quick recap of who Katie is. Katie is the host of Adventures in Behaviour Change podcast. She is also a successful author, artist, musician, and the creator of, I want to say Amiko, but that's not right. How do you say it, Katie?
Well, I say Amiko, but I don't know how to say it properly.
Amiko cards, which means friend. And so it's such a beautiful name of the Amiko cards. She is also the creative mind behind Little Challenges, where she uses ideas, inspiration, and practical tools to help make the messy business of being human just a little bit easier. When Katie had a life-changing breakdown in 2016, and she started to teach herself how to have a happier, healthier, more productive life. And within 4 months, I love that. It wasn't 16 more years. It was 4 months. That's how powerful this human spirit is. And in 4 months, she no longer qualified for any mental health diagnosis for the first time in her adult life. And she has remained well ever since. Katie, thank you so very much for being with us. And the listeners, again, I am so very grateful.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Well, I have to tell you. So a couple of things. So from our first conversation, a couple of things. When you said your sons now are 16, I believe you said 16 and 18. And I thought, you know what? That's another thing and you don't need to reveal your age, but you look so young to me that I thought, wait, 16, when you said kids, I was thinking infants, like 2 and 4 years old, not 16 and 18
Oh, I
years
love
old.
you even more now.
Oh, it's so true. And I was on your website looking all over. I have all kinds of different pictures of you and videos of you. And it's like, yeah, wait, what? 16 and 18? That's not correct. So you look wonderful in that. And not that that's part of all of this, except that because you were in such a dark place. And people think that when you're in such a dark place, you can never come out of it, or it's always going to be part of me and you're going to see it on me. And I never knew this part of you until this conversation, Katie, when I met you in Florida a little over a year ago. To me, you're just such a beacon of health. You look so vibrant and alive and wonderful. I never knew any part of this story where you almost took your life or attempted to take your life and had a nervous breakdown in 2016. And from that part on, everything in your life changed. So this is where I want to pick up. So listeners, please go back and listen to part 1 so you understand the full gist of this. So before we get into what's going on now, you also said when you were young that you, when you were 12 years old, the mental health, you felt so different than others. And you're so right, because you said this too. I think we all feel like we're so different, but nobody ever tells us that feeling that you're feeling is so very normal. This is just how everybody feels. We just feel like we're so alone and separated from everything and everybody. But you would have breakdowns as a teenager and have to leave school, like have gaps in schooling because you were having some mental health struggles. And I thought, God, like, how was that for you? I don't know, but you went to school in England and I don't know how it is here, but how it would be there, but I'm comparing it to the States. And it just seems like in the little town that I grew up in, that people just would be looking at you like the hell is wrong with you? Like now it's even worse because God, like I'm struggling with this. And now people are even looking at me like I'm completely crazy. Like, oh my God. So can you talk about that a little bit before we move into this beautiful work that you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at that age, I had my first breakdown when I was 12. At that age, nobody knew what it was. So I had a lot of physical symptoms. I was having tummy aches and I lost a lot of weight and I would be very tired and lethargic. And so I had loads of tests. I had to keep going back to the doctor and the hospital. And then one day the doctor just said to my mum, well, we can't find anything. We think it's in her mind. But in those days, so that was, let me think, that was 1984. I was 12 and people did not, well, certainly in my family, people didn't talk about your mental health. It just wasn't something
Yeah,
that was even referred to, I suppose.
great.
So it was kind of bewildering. And it was really bewildering to me that I felt as though there was something very wrong with my body.
Mm.
Uh, but nobody seemed to be able to find anything. And now looking back, I can see that probably I had a lot of psychosomatic symptoms. So I was very anxious and I was really struggling to fit in socially. And I was also just trying to find my place in the world, trying to figure out a lot of things. As I said last week, I was someone who lived in my head a lot. So I was always analyzing things and probably was thinking in a way that maybe was a bit unusual for a 12-year-old to be quite so analytical and ruminative. But it didn't make sense to me. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it was very frightening. And I could see that my parents were really worried and it was having quite an impact on the rest of the family. And I absorbed quite a sense of guilt, I suppose, because I wasn't well, but I apparently was making myself ill and I didn't know how I was doing it. So that sowed a seed of not trusting myself, which went on to cause a lot more problems actually. And the work I do now is very much based on the idea that it's important for us to learn how to listen to ourselves and to trust what we know to be true on the inside rather than constantly looking outside of ourselves for someone to tell us who we are, what we need. So learning to build that sense of checking in with oneself and having respect for that knowing is very important. And that's something that I really try to encourage in all of the work that I do, because I know what it's like not to do that. And I know where you can end up as a result.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. Because you have a profound story with that. My gosh. So, along with having this conversation with yourself, when you sat down at the computer, this was the weekend of your son's birthday, excuse me, and you sat down at the computer and you started to have this conversation where it was coming up. You were just typing this. It's like, I don't even know where this is coming from, but you realized that this was just a part of yourself that was a kinder, much nicer, more compassionate part of yourself. And through that, that's the part that got you on the path. And these, I think you said 13 months, maybe it was 13 months, 14 months. And then you just stopped the writing because then you knew, I mean, this is all part of your journey. And I guess this is what I'm asking you, like, what were some of the most helpful things that you learned during your recovery and tapping into this part of you? I know I can't help it, Katie, man. I know I have this interview with you and I am just all enthralled with this because like this, it is so, if everybody knew that this part of us is always in there, there's this super loving us that's inside of us, and it's just love and it wants absolutely the best for us. And sometimes it takes the hardest knocks in the world for us to be able to connect with it. I know that's what happened with me. It took us so many hard knocks. I'm a slow learner to begin with, but it's so profound that if everybody just knew that, how life would be so much simpler. And I know that that's what you're doing with your business and the cards and the things that you do. So I won't interrupt anymore. I'm so excited. So can you share that part with, the things that helped you, the most helpful things that you learned during your recovery?
Well, that writing process, which I came upon completely accidentally, that was
Yeah.
one of the most helpful things because it it set me on a path of self-compassion, which was completely new. And I've looked into it subsequently, and there's lots of evidence actually that people are much wiser than they realize. So we know that, we know from research that people tend to give their friends much better advice than they give themselves. But
Yeah.
if you're able to give your friend good advice, it shows that it's in there. So the difficulty often is that there's something obscuring it or obstructing it from getting through. And that was the case with me. So I found that the writing process it was a way of kind of tricking my mind, I suppose, so that I could get at the good stuff that at other times I would hear coming out of my mouth when I was talking to somebody else, but I'd never heard pointed towards me, if you like. So that was a useful device. And I think people have their own ways of accessing that why is in a self. I would never suggest that writing is the only way to do it, because I think we're wonderfully creative and we're all very different, and people will find their own way of getting there. But for me, I still can't explain how it is that began. And I can't explain how it is that sometimes I would sit down and start writing about a problem I had no idea how to solve. And then I would literally just type out an answer that made complete sense that I'd had no access to beforehand. It still
Oh,
bemuses me, but I have such respect for that now. And I genuinely believe that we can all find ways of accessing that inner wisdom because it is there. It's just finding your own route to it, really. So that self-compassion was hugely important. Another thing I think that I really needed to learn was that if you want to change how you're behaving, it's not necessarily the case that you have to throw out everything that went before and then in a big dramatic gesture replace it with a whole load of new stuff. I think I was very all or nothing in my thinking. Things were either terrible or they were wonderful. And when I was recovering from my breakdown, there was a huge temptation to just turn away from everything that I was, everything that I had been, try and reinvent myself totally. But a big piece of learning for me was that making little changes in your life and sort of becoming an experimenter, becoming a scientist, if you like,
yeah.
of your own experience. So to try something and then to try it for a little while and then see what happens and observe and maybe record it in some way by talking about it or by writing it down or whatever you want to do. Kind of getting to know yourself by making small changes and then perhaps keeping the ones that you like and discarding the ones that don't really work for you, and becoming a bit playful and experimental and quite light with that process of seeing how you can change and exploring what's possible for you. That was a big thing because I think I had always seen things in terms of needing to be big and impressive and important. I was very invested in looking like I was doing important things.
Mm.
And particularly, after coming out of the hospital, I felt like I needed to look like I was doing big important things because I had so much I felt I needed to atone for, if you like. But actually, it was the really, really small things, the learning how to get enough sleep, the learning to get regular exercise, the learning how to forgive myself, the learning how to just enjoy the moment, all the little gifts, that drop
Yeah.
into your day, all those beautiful moments that I think I had been so busy trying to do important things, I just hadn't been paying attention. So